haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Good morning and welcome back to Cult Chat. We're really excited to be with you today. Good morning, Liz. Good morning, Kaz.
Good morning.
What's been happening in your worlds? Summertime?
Lawn mowing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. I get on a ride-on lawnmower.
Oh, you're so lucky. They look really fun.
They are fun, and there's just something really cathartic about it, but it does take a couple of hours. You can either do the first hour on the ride-on and then do an hour with the hand mower, or you can mix it up a little bit, but there's something amazing, and you have this dream that you're going to go out there and just smell the daisies, or sometimes I think I'll listen to a podcast, but it's all just a dream because I get out there and my lawnmower is not new. It's quite old and it's noisy, and you know how hard it is to listen to something? Yeah.
Right, but isn't it kind of cathartic to just get out there and, be in nature and not listen to something?
Definitely. So I actually usually do that. And, I used to hate lawn mowing. Well, no, I didn't. I just didn't know that I enjoyed it. I thought I didn't like it, but that's because I'd never done it. And it was many years into the marriage when Graham was indisposed for he either hurt his back or he'd had an operation. And the lawns really needed mowing. They were really, really long. I was getting embarrassed. And I thought to myself one day, why don't I mow the lawns? I still remember it to this day. I mowed the lawns and I thought, I really enjoyed this.
Oh man, I've always loved mowing the lawns, and I'm sad at the moment though because we've joined the no mow movement. In other words, we don't have a lawn. You don't have a lawn either, do you?
I don't have a lawn. It's very deliberate.
I miss it. Yeah, we've fully mulched and gardened it up, but I miss mowing the lawns. So
no, I don't. I'm baffled by this passion. What words did you use? You used amazing. You used dream. You used cathartic.
Yeah.
I'm not in your camp.
I look forward to
I'm going to get rid of the lawn camp.
Righty-ho. Oh, well. Welcome to Kaz's Comfortable Zone, the podcast.
No, in my weekends I go mountain biking.
Yeah, that's true.
Sound fun.
And you know what I think about mountain biking?
Yeah.
Kaz and I have a bit of a joke. Do we have anything much in common?
No, we talk about cults together. We're working on it.
You're both brunettes. Did point that out to you. Yeah, but I can't see any other similarities.
We are modelling how to get on with people who have things that are not in common with one another.
And we get on very well.
Cat person, rat person, the list goes on. Anyway, so today we are digging into the words coercive and control, or the phrase coercive control. These two words are so important that we have added them to our tagline for Cult Chat. Well, they were there from the beginning. You might have seen that. We've got three words there: cultiness, coercion, and control. We chose those three words because they're what we're all about. We are fascinated by these concepts. We believe they're a really important phenomenon right across our society. And as you know, a key goal of ours is to educate our listener and the public about what these things look like, how to recognise them, what effects they have. So today we're going to be digging into in more detail what even is coercive control.
Yeah, I for one find this idea of coercive control very slippery. I've spent the last 6 to 8 weeks trying to really understand it through different books I'm trying to read and thoughts I'm trying to kind of hold in my head, and it just keeps on slipping away from me. And I'm a doctor, I'm educated, I'm working hard to hold these concepts, yet they don't want to stay in my head, and I find that really peculiar. And in fact, it's what I'm hearing from people talking about it, is that others can't get it, others can't grasp it, and it seems to be quite an invisible idea in the world.
And yet it is critical, because harmful groups, coercive control is like the way they operate. It's their number one tactic. It's the water you live in. It's all around you. And so if you can't recognise it, you can easily be pulled into it. And so you're looking at perhaps inside a cult, a society where people don't realise they're being coercively controlled, and they actually think they want this thing. But I recall was it that John Reddy in one of the Coercive films saying you're buying into someone else's dream, but they have sold it to you as your dream. And so if you can't get a handle on that, you don't realise the times when perhaps there's gaslighting going on, where there's so many other words and concepts that we'll be pulling into these episodes.
Yeah, so it does seem like there is a bit of confusion about this topic, and hopefully by the end of today you'll understand it a little bit better along with us, and hopefully Kaz will have embedded a bit more into her brain. So by the end of this episode, we hope that you'll have a better understanding of how coercive control is used in intimate partner settings. That is an area where a lot more research and kōrero has gone on about it, and legislation in various countries around the world has been paired with it there in family violence and intimate partner settings. But we will, of course, then be bringing that back to the concepts of how groups get involved with coercive control. So, yeah, we'll be chatting a bit later on about some of the laws. There's, it's getting better recognition in legal systems in various countries. But again, as Kaz said, there's still misunderstanding about it. So anyway, we'll be discussing all of these things, and
in fact, we'll be talking about them so much that we're going to do a 2-part episode on it. So make sure you join us for the second one.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just launch into it. What is coercive control? We thought we'd start with some definitions that we've stumbled across that come from sort of reputable sources,
like a dictionary.
Well, no,
I like starting simple.
Well, I've gone
Merriam-Webster's.
I've gone as my first to the New South Wales government discussion paper, Coercive Control, because they've recently updated one of their laws, and they're our neighbours. Coercive control in domestic family violence context describes patterns of abusive behaviour designed to exercise domination and control over the other party to a relationship. It is often a process that happens slowly over time. It can be nuanced in nature, making it difficult to identify. It can include a range of abusive behaviours, physical, psychological, emotional or financial, the cumulative effect of which over time robs the victim survivor of their autonomy and independence as an individual.
Whoa.
Yeah. I think your first phrase, patterns of behaviour. And so you're not just necessarily looking at a one-off event or an intimate partner violence event. This is looking at all of the patterns of behaviour that I guess set the scene for other kinds of violence.
Well, it said in over time. Yeah, over time. So that's interesting. Right, that's a key part of it. I thought it was interesting how it said that it can cut across physical, psychological, mental, emotional or financial. So we're saying this can happen across a whole life in a whole range of areas. Would it normally involve, if someone was being coercively controlled in one area, do you know if it also means they're likely to be being controlled in all of the areas? Like, is it kind of all or nothing?
Like, are we talking about from one person controlling another?
Yeah, I'm not talking about a group setting right now.
Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me if you're trying to strip someone of their autonomy and independence to do it in one area.
Right, okay.
I think the research, any of the research that I've looked at, there's this definite interconnectedness. And I think if you look at a coercively harmful group, you're going to see
the same thing on a bigger scale.
Right. So it's like an upscaled version, and inside that you're going to have the range of those. I think the thing with that is...
So we're not going to control, if I'm a coercively controlling person, I'm not going to control your finances, but then completely let you do whatever whatever you like with your time. I'm also going to be
Seems
a bit controlling about your time or your...
I guess there are degrees of it. And so you need to look at what is the impact of this coercive control.
Right.
And they say that it's a chaos maker in relationships. And then in a larger group, it's like a destructive force multiplied.
Right. Actually, that last line's really key, isn't it, Kaz? It says the cumulative effect, just to repeat it for the listener, cumulative effect robs the victim survivors of autonomy and independence. That's really crucial and really fascinating. Right, so that's I guess you could go, that's the outcome, the fruit that you're looking for if you're worried there is coercive control happening, to ask, is there a loss of autonomy and a loss of independence happening here? Which is tricky when you're kids, because kids don't have... Anyway. Yeah.
So,
well, Wade Mullen, because he's one of my favourites, the book Something's Not Right, and there's a quote in his book. Actually, it's Claire Walker that says this, but Wade Mullen requotes her. Coercive control is the carbon monoxide of a toxic relationship where an abuser uses controlling behaviours to dismantle their victims from the inside out. And so you get that concept. Wade Mullen talks about harmful groups dismantling the external world of people first. So that's the isolation, cutting them off from, previous, family members, pulling them away into an isolated place. That's your external world gets dismantled. And then they go for the internal world. And the mechanism they use to do that is coercive control.
Well, the idea of coercive control actually was coined by a sociologist called Evan Stark in his book, 2007 book, Coercive Control, How Men Entrap Women in Personal Life. So he played a really key role. He's an American sociologist and social worker, I think, forensic social worker, who played a key role in a number of the laws that have become legal, particularly the UK coercive control law that was enacted in 2015. And he is still...
And that's intimate partner settings.
Yes.
His research was in that setting?
Yes,
okay.
Very much so. And he's about to publish a book, actually, on coercive control and its impact on children in domestic harm environments. So he's still very much a writer and a
researcher.
Yes, absolutely. And one of his definitions, I just recently listened, this is a shout out to Cult Vault, the podcast Cult Vault, and an interview that he had with Casey from the Cult Vault. And in that interview that I listened to recently, he defined it in this way. He said, in simple terms, coercive control is making you do something you don't want to do, making you be something you don't want to be. And if someone in a relationship is systematically, on an ongoing basis, denying your personhood, regardless how you define it, that is an abusive relationship. So this is the man who has defined coercive control. This is where it came from.
That's fascinating. In a group of the group thing.
Because the people in the group often say, I believe I'm willingly doing this thing. Yeah, it happens to line up with what the leader wants, but I know I'm not being controlled.
It's my personal choice.
It's my personal choice. But it's not, but they can't see it. So isn't it interesting that perhaps that's a second generation response? Maybe the people who are born into coercively controlled groups have that, no, I'm willingly cutting off my family.
It's the only world they've known.
But that's all they've known. But the first generation joined the group not wanting to cut off their family, and they were the ones who had it taken away from them. They actually felt the impact of the coercion, of the loss
of their autonomy,
of the making you do something you don't want to do.
Right, whereas the second generations, that's all they've known.
It's their culture.
So they don't have something to compare it to.
So they can't see it. So I'm going to be looking with interest at the older people who leave Gloriavale over time, and some have, and asking them, what did you think you were joining? What happened?
You're talking about first generation.
What happened? Was this the dream you thought you were, was this what you thought you were signing up to? How did you see the things you used to believe morphing into the group, and what did you feel about it? Because they got trapped. I reckon that first generation might be the key to helping us understand.
Right. Interesting. You're fortunate they're still alive, because, in some groups, multi-generational groups, the first generation people aren't there to ask those questions.
No.
So,
because second generation, I find them going, oh no, I'm more than happy.
And the problem with coercive control, of course, is that you have done something often that is morally reprehensible. So there's a lot of shame associated with talking about the things that you have agreed to do And therefore, like Centrepoint adults, they don't want to have a bar of looking at the past often. I don't want to make mass generalisations here, but in my experience with Centrepoint adults, most of them don't want to dig into why they did the things they did.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Would there have been some...
Those are the first generation I'm talking about.
Any examples of the kind of coercive control that might have been at play that robbed victims of autonomy, independence as individuals? In the Centrepoint case, the progressive promiscuity that, you were coercively, you were made to feel that a monogamous, committed relationship, committed attachment to one person was somehow less than. That to be more free, to be more open, was to have meaningless sexual encounters all the time with multiple people, with different people.
That was the ideal that was held up.
Absolutely, it was held up.
Right.
And so people were going into the group with their husband and their 3 kids maybe, and they were like, well, we clearly can't continue to have this monogamous relationship. And maybe they both didn't have the same comfort level with that.
Because you've talked about how Bert Potter would get all the adults to stand up in a room and then blindfold everybody and then go and just bump into somebody and you've got to have sex with that person.
Yeah.
Like he
tasks. He gave people tasks that broke
down primary attachments.
And so the tactic of the coercion and control is that he's the one giving the orders, making the suggestions, and if you say no...
Oh, you're absolutely
you're just like society, and it's repressed, blocked, not open, and you're never going to find, you're never going to reach this sort of self-actualization and understanding. You're sort of wounding, and what you need to do is shed off all those boundaries and barriers, and the way to do that is to completely just to break all attachments. Of course, that's not how he put it. He framed it in a really positive way.
He framed it so that you thought it was a good thing. So I'm doing this for your benefit. So the financially controlling partner says, this is, no, we need to save because we're saving for something, and so that's why you can't go and spend that. But really, it might be that it's their way of exerting control, financial control over someone. But
can I go back to Evan Stark? This is from Jess Hill's book that I've mentioned before. Forgot the name of it momentarily. It'll come to me. We'll put it in the show notes. I've mentioned it in other groups. Jess Hill's book on domestic.
See what you made me do. See what you made me do.
See what you made me do. Yes, see what you made me do. The aim, she's quoting Evan, the aim of coercive control is total domination rather than simply to win compliance on a particular issue. In other situations of domestic abuse, the victim may feel degraded, angry or helpless, but may not actually be afraid of their abuser. Coercive control is different. So she's making a real difference between violence that just happens and violence that is motivated by a desire for total domination of the person. So coercive control is different. It is a strategic campaign of abuse held together by fear.
Okay. Wow, and maybe that's the link into the big harmful groups, because what did the likes of Hopeful and Victory and others we've talked to on the show talk about? Swimming in fear. Fear being this driving, motivating factor to keep you in line.
So for the rest of today's episode, what we want to do is a little exercise, and it is actually using content from Jess Hill's book. It is See What You Made Me Do, so thank you guys, you got that right, to kind of explore how intimate partner violence, coercive control, prisoner of war, coercive control, in a communist sort of setting from North Korea, China, kind of 1950s Korean War kind of content, and cultic groups, how they are the same. What's the Venn diagram? Is the Venn diagram the same? Are they all just sort of like slightly different in the middle? Or is it just really one big circle? 3 circles, one on top of the other. I hope people understand Venn diagrams. Do you understand Venn diagrams?
Yeah, I do.
About that
I was a maths teacher. Got them sorted. Circles that overlap, and in the middle you have your commonality.
Like the Olympics logo.
We've found a commonality. I like Venn diagrams. You like Venn diagrams.
Lovely. And Glorabelle has got one big mess of a Venn diagram, and when people come out, we try to say to them, you have different spheres of your life. There are places where they overlap, but the complete domination where they all morph together, there's a problem. Maybe in the middle of all that, there's just a big title, coercive control.
All right. Well, I reckon their prisoner of war camps, intimate partner violence, and cult groups have a pretty big central together spot in the Venn diagram.
Ooh. Okay,
so Albert Biderman has this. He's a researcher in the 1950s.
Shout out to Albert.
He coined the chart of control. Here's the context, the social historical context. In 1953, at the end of the Korean War, 23 American prisoners of war were released by the Koreans. They came out into the free world and they immediately defected to communist China, which distressed America. Their good men didn't want to come back to America.
Wow. So
they discovered that in the prisoner of war camps, the North Korean American prisoner of war's prisoners cooperated with the enemy to an unexpected degree that actually was very distressing. They informed on other prisoners, they gave false testimonies, they made radio broadcasts all about...
They sold out.
They sold out, and of course they were criticised enormously.
Yes.
Yeah, they were extolling the virtues of communism and condemning Western capitalism. Not great for your American soldiers to be doing such a thing. Yeah. So that distressed the Americans. The CIA started to investigate brainwashing. So that's where that term comes from. It's a sophisticated new weapon of mind control that could render a man's brain a blank slate and implant new thoughts, memories and beliefs.
Brilliant.
Okay, so this is where Albert Biderman comes in. He's a social scientist in the US Air Force. Biderman was dispatched to discover why so many American airmen had cooperated with the communists. Through interviewing returned prisoner of war prisoners, Biderman discovered the communists were using age-old methods of coercive control. They'd not been used in war before. Violence was often used, but actual violence wasn't necessary or particularly effective to gain compliance. All that was needed was fear.
Wow. Great.
So in 1982, Diana Russell, in her book Rape and Marriage, presented Biderman's chart of coercion against a list of common techniques used in domestic abuse situations and noted, golly, these are similar. The North Koreans were using these tactics strategically, but men in marriage and intimate partner settings were just stumbling across it accidentally. They were accidentally figuring out how to do the same thing that the North Koreans were doing strategically to their prisoners. So back to Judith Herman. Love Judith Herman. I'm going to keep talking about Judith Herman throughout all of these podcast episodes. She later stated, she's a psychiatrist who's an expert on trauma, the coercive methods that enable one human being to enslave another are remarkably consistent.
Oh, yes.
In situations of domestic abuse, the effect of coercive control is the same. The perpetrator becomes the most powerful person in the victim's life. Their psychology is shaped by the perpetrator's actions and beliefs. So we're talking about intimate partner violence, prisoner of war in communist camps, the tactics discovered by accidents in the intimate partner setting. How can we compare and contrast these in the cult situation? So the Venn diagram, the third wheel in the Venn diagram.
Okay, can I go back and read that just a little slower so that people can take in that quote? The coercive methods that enable one human being to enslave another are remarkably consistent. Doesn't that make sense when we're looking at all these harmful groups, why there are all these similarities? Yeah, what's in common? Human beings.
And coercive
control.
Yeah.
In situations of domestic abuse, the effect of coercive control is the same. The perpetrator becomes the most powerful person in the victim's life, and their psychology is shaped by the perpetrator's actions and beliefs. How many times have you heard it said with cult survivors that they had become little versions of the leader of their group?
I'm thinking Star Wars and all the white guys in suits.
That are just like robots.
The clones,
I hear a lot of different honest
clones.
Glorabelle people saying, oh, I'm much more like, beep beep than I would like to admit. Whichever leader in the group had the most pervasive impact.
Is there? I just had a sudden scary thought. If we educate the public about the effects of and how effective coercive control is, are there going to be horrible people out there who go, oh, this is blinking useful. I'm going to use this to control people in my life.
They already know, and they're already doing it because there's it's the humanity that's in common. But it's also
quite useful to be able to force others to do whatever you want them to do.
Totally, and you're right. there are books. And I know...
Books, but selling on Amazon.
I have,
Of how to do this?
Oh, totally. And I know people inside Glorivale said that they saw the books that were sitting on Hopeful Christian's bookshelf. And there were lots of books from fascinating
we're not
authors.
talking about, is it Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People? Like,
Though
that's one end of the spectrum.
Bird was into him.
Really,
Bird was
really?
into him, as was David.
Maybe that's the soft end of the
David
spectrum.
Berg from the Children of God.
Oh,
He was
yes.
also-
Yeah.
He read David
I'm pretty sure it
Berg,
was
or
him.
David Berg was into Dale Carnegie. Oh, okay, right. Because I guess they've taken some of those strategies that you can use for positive influence, and then they've like exploded them into...
So, like, the cult leaders are behaving like the North Koreans in a strategic learning and understanding as a strategy.
Yes, deliberate.
Unlike intimate partner violence settings, majority of them just stumble across.
Right, I was
how to do
interested
it.
that you said that they have come across it by accident.
Well, it's because it's human psychology.
Like, you've kind of learned it in the playground. If I push that person, they're scared of me and they'll do what I want.
I've figured out how to get my kids to do what I want.
Really? Tell me
I'm a
your
benign
secrets.
dictator in my household. But at the end of the day, it's their needs that I'm thinking of.
Yes,
At
not
the
your
end of the
needs.
But
day-
that's what the leader says. That's what the leader says.
I'm doing it for your good.
And
there's
then
a
have to come
cult-
back to your house and have a wee chat to your kids and just see if they'll write. You can't control your cats, though. It's impossible to control a cat.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Anyway, let's dig into Albert Biderman's chart of control.
Okay.
Well, he says basically that there is an order that you work your way through to move from a free individual to one under complete domination.
Okay, yeah.
And,
But of course, because if you're coming in newly to a group, you can't start at the end point. People are just going to walk.
Absolutely.
You've got to warm them up.
The boil
Turn
the
up the
frog
temperature.
slowly thing.
Boil the frog, turn it up, or else
So-
you're going to lose those first people. And if you lose your first people, you've lost your next generation too. If you want a long-term group,
Which is why recruitment's so fascinating, right? Because often recruitment is that slow boil, isn't it? So are you saying you're going to take us through a little course on how to create a robot? How to create a clone? Is that, are you teaching us how to do this?
Yeah, okay. Not
That's
as
scary.
not
people
as
aren't
an
going to be
expert,
buying
guys.
books. They're going to be listening to Cult Chat.
Yeah.
Coercive control episodes.
To learn how to
Well,
control
it's
others.
Dummies for cult leaders.
Well, like as I was reading Jess Hill's book and she was talking about intimate partner violence in prisoner of war camps, I was going, hey, but what about the cults? Let's see if my girls and I can work out what you do in a cult setting with this information. Okay,
That's the challenge.
So first step, you need to establish love and trust. Okay.
The offer of
Love bombing.
Love bombing. Hospitality. I could be accused of that. Could we all? Like, open
I
your
know,
house
that's the
up.
scary thing. I'm already scared. I'm already nervous by this.
Yeah.
Because who doesn't?
Okay.
Like, it's a good thing to establish love and trust. You've just read out a very good thing.
Yeah.
Well, we all need to. Well, why would we get involved with a person or with a group?
Unless there was something you were interested in, something that attracted you there.
There's always love.
People think they're joining something that's good for them, and we're always on the hunt for something that fills a need.
But I guess the problem, what I'm trying to say, is that even when you join a good group or enter a good relationship, that's the first step as well.
It is.
Of course.
So that step is not wrong in itself.
No.
It's just, you're just saying it's what these groups do.
But it's how the love and trust get bound.
Yeah.
How
So
the abuser and
in
Right.
an intimate
Yeah,
partner
okay.
situation,
Okay, we'll
it's
let you carry
love
on.
that first binds a victim to her abuser and love that makes her forgive and make excuses for him.
excuses.
In the prisoner of war camp, the most insidious and effective technique the communists used was false friendship.
Wow.
So they deliberately set out to... Sinshin J. Do you remember Laura talking about go to these groups and you thought you were amongst a whole lot of
Newbies, new recruits.
but actually there were plants in it who were making friendship with you.
Yeah, and
What the
they were
crazy
actually
thing
already
is,
full recruits.
They were full recruits. And when they
that was scary.
When they told them about it like a few months later, those people didn't pack their bags, leave and run away. She said she felt really sort of upset that she'd been misled, but they actually let them in on the lie.
Right.
Struck me, but by then they're probably down at like number 8.
Yeah, well, the North Korean prisoner of wars, they all went back to their friends, didn't they, after they were released?
So they genuinely felt there was a real friendship there with their oppressor.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine the prison guard outside the cell having a yarn, talking, sharing cigarettes.
Yeah, or saying, I'll give you a
know.
cigarette, and so it feels like a kind person who's just part of a bigger system, and it's not really him who's the oppressor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes. He's
Fascinating.
listening to your secrets, taking letters to your family. I don't know.
Wow. So maybe if it doesn't make sense, if it's all too good to be true, that love bombing, which is that over expression.
I think what kind of person would all other reasons being equal would actually look at someone welcoming them in a loving way and be cynically
no. You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. This is appealing to our basic desire and need to trust a stranger, to be part of a group, to get along, to think the best. It's an exceptional aspect of humanity. It's how we...
Yeah, we're wired to do that.
Yeah. We are wired to be in groups. That is our basic human unit of function.
I like that.
So...
All right, so we can all be accused of that, and yet that is the first step where those little question marks could be coming in. Okay,
so second step on Albert Biderman's chart is to isolate the victim. So in the intimate partner setting, as long as the victim maintains meaningful social and emotional connections, the abuser's influence is diluted. To become the most powerful person in her life, he must eliminate her external sources of support and silence the voices that would question his behaviour.
Okay. And now so that's when it starts to get dark.
And yet, how slowly that can happen.
Okay. And it would be subtle. It would be like, I don't think she's good for you.
Okay.
I see what you two are like together, and I really think she doesn't respect you.
Okay. Or you could build it into the doctrine of your group. Like I'm just thinking in the Exclusive Brethren, they actually had doctrine and teaching against, they called them that you were not allowed to have special friendships. And I think their kind of vague meaning that was attached to that was that, you could get too close and there could be immorality that happens. In other words, somebody might have an affair or something. And so that was like a blanket rule. Special friendships were not allowed. And so, mums were not allowed to go, it was not encouraged for mums to go and have coffee with another mum or for dads to, I don't know, do whatever men do when they hang out. People couldn't go to the pub for a beer or whatever. But this whole concept of having friendships was not allowed.
Starts there. They're going to rub off immoral. On you. All the Bible verses, you're in the world but not of the world. And so there's already...
Well, are you talking there about friendship with the outside? Because I'm talking about with the brethren, you weren't allowed, friendships weren't encouraged inside with one another. And so that's built in...
entirely.
It's
both.
That's not even subtle like what you're talking about. And that's blatant.
I recently have listened to the whole 12 Tribes podcast called Inside the Tribe, which is an exceptional podcast series I recommend to our listeners, Inside the Tribe, in which they talked about in the 12 tribes how people were constantly being moved internationally all the time into different groups. As soon as they started to get too close, form an attachment, feel like they trusted someone enough to actually start to share their concerns, they're on a plane, another country.
That's because when you look at, you're looking at your prisoner of war there, the person's got this physical imprisonment, but when you go places like Auschwitz and you have a tour, and they actually tell you that only once in the history of Auschwitz was there an uprising.
Wow.
Because people were so isolated, separated, and kept so low and so down. To have an uprising, you need cohesiveness. You need to create a movement. Yeah. You need to create trust, and these environments stop you doing that.
Wow.
And so that's the link to the cults, obviously. You get your physical isolation, you get your friendship isolation, and the more isolated you get, the more away from the world, the more easy it is to get power and control over someone.
And I didn't mention the prisoners. Obviously, they were in prison. That's how they were isolated.
Yeah.
That one's an easy one. Okay, number 3. These groups monopolise perception, or the third thing in the Biderman's chart is monopolise perception. So once you've isolated your victim from the outside world, you then influence their perceptions so that only your perceptions are the ones they think of.
This is interesting, because as we've been talking, and I often think about this when I think about high demand groups, I'm often seeing and listening to the different narratives, that it's so obvious to me how there's always the narrative from the group and how there's always a stark difference with the group's narrative to outsiders' narratives or to former members' narratives. And it's the age-old question of whose reality is real, whose narrative is right. And what you're describing here...
The group leader's narrative is right. I'm afraid.
What you're describing here is that the group leader is actually cultivating a certain narrative, and they're saying that this is real reality, just as the same as a coercively controlling intimate partner is saying my version of the world is right, and so and so's dangerous for you, or you can't spend money, or you can't have an education for it's bad for you. So again, they're imposing their narrative and perception. Is that what you're saying? Onto the victim of coercive control.
Nothing more obvious than the Gloriavale Employment Court case. 20 people who'd left Gloriavale, speaking of their experiences, 30 people inside. Wow, the people inside were all just spouting the same narrative, the same line.
And was it glowing terms? Like, we love working like that.
Absolutely. It was so starkly obvious that
They're definitely stormtroopers, aren't they?
Yeah, their perception.
You've watched Star Wars, haven't you?
I'm not a sci-fi
she's not a
girl.
Star Wars
I have
lady.
watched it. But,
I've only just started watching it the last couple of years and really enjoying it, but quite confusing.
Stormtroopers.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the white guys and
stuff.
stuff.
Scary, man.
Yeah, but I'm just saying they're all clones.
Yeah.
Yep, so the perception is always that of the group leader. It's his perception. And what about you watch films inside these groups? It's such a common thing that people inside these groups watch films, but they're films on war. That's so interesting. Or bad things that happen to people, and they use them as a tool to say the world is evil.
To help do this monopolising of perception.
They're changing perception of what the outside, that it's worse, it's more evil, it's more wicked, people are unloving. And you actually believe that. You couldn't live out there, you wouldn't survive.
So in the intimate partner violence situation, he will redirect her attention away from his behaviour and onto her failings, convincing her that all the issues are a result of her inadequacies. Gradually, the abuser draws his victim further away from the real world and into his version of reality.
So gaslighting.
Yeah. And in the prisoner of war camp, they physically isolate them. They use sensory tricks like darkness, bright lights, sleep deprivation. And I'm also thinking in cult situations about, again, sleep deprivation, long sermons or courses where there's no other input, chanting, thought-stopping cliches, all things to kind of narrow down the perceptions into what they want you to think and feel and experience.
Wow.
And they say it doesn't take more than 3 months inside a group or a thought system to actually
start impacting you.
Completely. 3 months. So what we've noticed is people who've gone and joined places like Gloriavale, they don't last more than a few weeks. Within that time, they recognise what's happening and they go. And so there's no new recruits or new blood going in.
Yeah, because they're not focused on this gradual process. They're all at the.
They're all back
at number 9.
And it's just insane. But you know what? The first people that joined, if they looked now into the future, they would never have joined what it's become either.
Yeah.
So this is a different group, one that's closed and not accepting recruits, because they're all well down Biderman's chart. They're at the end. They're at the last stage, and they're not kind of no longer practised or ready to draw people through the other steps.
It's the same with the Plymouth Brethren. You're not got new recruits.
Very rare to have new recruits, and they don't actively look for new recruits. Which is fascinating, because then you think about something like Shinshonji or the Jehovah's Witnesses, like with the JWs, door knocking is a core part of the practice that's required of members. You have to do X amount of door knocking.
You're establishing love and trust.
Right, so that just intrigues me that some groups are much more active with trying to get their members to do the recruiting.
But Gloriavale they did do recruiting. They were in the square, and then they made a deliberate decision. It came out in court. We're going to stop that. We're going to focus on
building the community.
Child rearing.
Yes,
having growth through
breeding.
It was a policy.
Okay. Yep. So once you've monopolised the perception of your victim, you move on to inducing debility and exhaustion. So the prisoner of war camp
what is debility?
We'll find out. The communists place great reliance on poor understanding of the victim of what's happening to them. Deceiving, tricking and confusing the victim are important. The further he found down the rabbit hole, the more exhausted he became. Eventually it was easier just to let the captor define his reality. So in the intimate partner violence situation, gaslighting is the term for this used there. So we mentioned it earlier, so it's a little bit, these two, monopolising perception and inducing debility and exhaustion, seem overlap a little bit in my head. But in the intimate partner setting, the knowing fabrication or distortion of a person's reality is made to make a person doubt their reality. So confusion and anxiety increases. She leans more on her abuser as the source of truth, no longer trusting herself. So she gets exhausted, and that's part. I think these two overlap a little, but yeah.
So it's breaking, again, coming back to that very first thing around breaking down your sense of autonomy and independence. So there's a creation.
That's the point.
That's a creation of dependence is happening.
Yeah, as you no longer trust your own instincts, your idea of what is right and wrong.
And so then you're reliant.
And you get exhausted and disabled.
And then you're reliant on the coercively controlling entity or person to set you
because you don't trust me.
And
I don't trust me anymore.
For your own mental sanity, you say you're happy with that. So I'm looking at we've recently had a new government and there was a voting opportunity, and so prior, I've done a reflection on it on the Gloriavale Leavers website page about voting inside Gloriavale. And so they were actually told who to vote for. There was this whole thing around who to vote for. It was put in your mind. You were showed charts of what to tick and what to do.
Wow.
And then when people leave, I had people coming saying, I got to vote. A couple of them were telling me that it was giving them, their heart rate was rising, anxiety around the concept. Just tell me who to vote for. Like, didn't trust themselves that they could. But two of them really overcame it, and they told me they went and they decided, I'm going to do this by myself. And they read through the candidates, and they made a decision, and they went and voted. And there was a sense of, accomplishment in voting, because up to this point, they had no longer trusted themselves to actually come up with the ability to have a decision. Just tell me what to do, tell me what to think.
Well, it's odd on in the Exclusive Brethren or Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, you're not allowed to vote. Well, traditionally, anyway, that is the strongly held thing is that you don't vote. But it's acceptable to financially donate to parties you want to get in.
Always been funny. And the Jehovah's Witnesses don't vote either.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you've exhausted your victim, you move on to enforce trivial demands.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we've all about those.
I have my sleeves rolled up. Let me roll them down so I don't get pulled to a servants and shepherds meeting.
My part has to be exactly in the right spot. So the victim's actions and behaviours are measured against arbitrary rules, enforced without warning, ever-changing, contradictory. To avoid punishment, the victim must memorise them.
Yes.
Attention becomes focused on anticipating demands, avoiding punishment, aligning to the victim's perception with that of the perpetrator. All this effort goes into compliance, not into the victim's needs or wants, nor into getting away. As the only purpose of the rules is to exact obedience, they are continually being revised.
Yes.
This is all about destabilising and distracting the victim so that they can't think about getting out.
And that is why sitting in court, you had people saying, this is what I used to have to stand up at the dinner table and apologise. And people from Gloriavale will be like, oh, that only happened a few times years ago. And so then, like they were kind of denying that it was ever a tactic, but it impacted the person who it happened to because it was a trivial thing. I put too much salt. They then got shamed for, but then they went on to shaming them for something else for the next year or two, and that one went by the wayside because they'd already made their point.
Right.
So you don't need to keep making the same point. What you need to do is the confusion, the changing. So someone else who put salt in the porridge 3 years later didn't stand up and have to apologise.
Right.
So there's this constant inconsistency and application, but it's always around trivial.
And when people are afraid, they want to know the rules so they don't get hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and if
so
the rules
it
are
adds to your hypersensitivity
and hypervigilance.
Yeah, sorry, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got them running around madly trying to do ridiculous things and constantly changing the foundation of what those ridiculous things are. Excellent. You've got a lot of control now. This is feeling really good. I'm pretty powerful.
You can stand up and say, this is happening tomorrow, and it happens tomorrow.
Exactly.
And isn't that the big joke? Wasn't that in the setting the record straight in Gloriavale? The way for change in Gloriavale was they announced it, and we did it from then on. Don't tell me change takes time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of our old episodes. If you want to listen to that, that's Gloriavale setting record straight. So now you want to demonstrate your omnipotence. Okay, so Evan Stark says, if abusive relationships were filmed in slow motion, they would resemble a grotesque dance where victims create moments of autonomy and perpetrators search and destroy them.
Wow, that's rather zombie-ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give an example?
Well, here in the prisoner of war camps, complete control over the prisoners' fate was clear. The impression was created by the prisoners' guard that resistance was futile in intimate partner violence situations. She learns that escape is impossible. Relentless surveillance. He relentlessly surveils her, so he might put a tracker on her to watch her, use an app that he knows exactly where she is at all times. He colonises the world that she inhabits through enforcing himself into all the little spaces in her life, and she starts to believe that no external force, such as the police or the courts, can help her.
Or the doctor.
And you'd also use violence to reinforce that idea as well. So... yeah.
With the cults, then it's just this surveilling of people, keeping tabs on people, snitching, that ever-present, all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipotent being is watching.
I'm thinking of confessions, and that used to happen at Centrepoint. They didn't have a religious theme; they had a therapeutic theme. So you'd have to go to your therapist. And tell them what was going on for you, and tell them all the things that would regurgitate all your internal worlds, and basically give them the information to control you.
Wow.
And that's exactly what Laura said in the Shinchonji episode about how they would use mystical manipulation to make you think that they knew stuff that they actually had just been
gossiping.
Yeah, someone
gossiping.
So not just
got from
omnipotence, omniscience, the all-knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah, all-knowing and all
So, so now this person or this leader or the prisoner of war, prisoners, guards, they're now controlling all your thinking. They are all powerful. You cannot escape them. At this point, what you want to do is to reinforce it, is to alternate punishments with rewards. We know this one,
because you can't.
So that's number 7.
It's fascinating because it's like they don't want the victim to perceive them as being a complete and utter monster. They still want to foster this love and trust in them, so they've got to do good things now and again to show them how awesome they are.
Yes, that's the problem when people come out of these groups.
Yeah.
You see it when they first come out. There's still this intense loyalty to this person who has committed so much harm, but they still say, but he was also really friendly and really compelling and really, and interesting, and
he was really kind to me on this one occasion.
Yeah,
we get that.
But,
I get that with people.
The perpetrator of the harm becomes the person who solves the harm.
Let's have a celebration day because we're all so exhausted. You've run us into the ground, but now we have a day where we can just kick
relax
back and have...
you're so kind. What a kind dictator you are.
Wild fun.
The prisoner of war guards were master shapeshifters. At various times and places, the captor may seek to achieve its purpose by representing itself as kindly, solicitous, smirking creatures. At others, it may wantonly display its brutality in all its nakedness.
Sure. Whoa. Terrifying.
Yeah. And of course, you as the victim has no idea when that's going to change. And you're constantly trying to get back to the state where you were loved.
So you do things for this person that you know is going to get a smile from them.
Exactly.
They've bought you.
Fawning.
Exactly.
Fawning.
And you start to blame yourself because for some reason your captor, your cult leader, whoever, is they're not in your good books anymore. And what have I done wrong?
Yeah, you're the problem, not them.
Absolutely.
And then you need to climb up the ladder by clambering over other people, snitching on them, pushing them down so that you can rise up again into receiving positive attention.
So Jess Hill says the kind treatment does the job of undermining psychic resistance far better than simply feeding the victim an unchanging diet of degradation and fear.
Yes.
The goal of the perpetrator is to instill in the victim not only the fear of death, but also gratitude for being allowed to live.
Sure.
You owe me your life.
Oh, my God.
I have heard that.
All right.
Wow. I've heard that. Glorify people. Like, you wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for us. If we didn't believe in having large families, every one of you children from number 3 down, you wouldn't be alive.
Wow.
Like,
you owe us your life.
You owe us your life. You owe me gratitude.
So, whipping through, I don't want to run out of time. Threats is the next one. It's used to prevent the victim from seeking help or leaving. There's no safe place outside, or it's inside or outside the group. Yeah. Well, we all know that one.
Classic.
Yeah. There's lots I've heard lots of threats of all the things that will go wrong.
The bad
house
things
might
that'll
get struck
happen
by
to you.
lightning.
Lightning strike, car crash, die of cancer. Like, they're the top 3 Glorival ones.
Really?
Can you think about exclusive breathing?
It's just phrases like you'll end up in the gutter, or it might be physical death, or it might be sickness, or it might be financial ruin or moral ruin, that kind
Addiction?
of thing.
Do they threaten you'll be a drug addict or a prostitute? Sort of?
You'll become immoral, you'll go into degradation. And so therefore a common phrase is things like, it's better to die inside than to leave, or that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, in the intimate partner violence setting, they are actually threatening family members, and they actually are actually threatening their lives afterwards. So
afterwards, so they're saying, if you go, I'll kill you.
Yes,
right.
Or I'll kill your family, or I'll harm your children.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So the threats to
they're very real.
They're doing those risk assessments.
Yeah. So the final one. This is the one that you know when you've completely got them.
Hang on, what about the eternal damnation?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, there's your big threat in a religious harmful group. Like, that is the one that very early on.
Absolutely.
You're going for not only this control in this life, but you're going to control the eternal life narrative as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And that's very powerful.
And if you commit suicide to escape this bad life, you will definitely not go to heaven and you will lose your afterlife.
Yeah.
Okay. So degradation, the final step in the Biderman's chart of control. The goal is degradation. The goal is to reduce the prisoner to a state of animal-like degradation, making the cost of resistance more damaging to self-esteem than capitulation.
So it's a risk assessment.
Say that again. Say that last line again.
The goal is to reduce the prisoner to a state of animal-like degradation, making the cost of resistance more damaging to self-esteem than capitulation.
Right.
The degradation can go to dehumanising extremes.
Okay.
And I have to say, I'm thinking of Bert Potter's incest tasks.
Oh, wow.
That's
stop it.
Just
so in the prisoner of war camps, they were prevented from basic hygiene, given demeaning punishments, insulted, taunted, denied privacy. Intimate partner violence, the psychological abuse is targeted straight to the victim's vulnerability because he knows her so intimately.
So that's where it will look differently in different relationships. There will be some elements that are more strongly, it depends on the victim's vulnerabilities.
And I'm thinking also of in Centrepoint how, like I said, the tasks of incest, things were done by the first generation to second generation that were simply degrading, absolutely degraded the relationships, and are so shaming that they still can't be talked about or honestly explored now. Judith Herman, my friend, my friend who I'd like to be my friend, not my real friend, my one-day friend, says the work of degradation is complete when the victim is forced to violate her own moral principles and betray her basic human attachments. Psychologically, this is the most destructive of all coercive techniques, for the victim who has succumbed loathes herself.
Oh, yes.
At this point, when the victim is under duress, participates in the sacrifice of others, that is when she's truly broken.
Oh, and the aim is to break people, to keep them under your control so you can have all your needs met.
So then you start participating.
Exactly. And now
they damage a victim's moral compass. We've talked about this before, that people in groups, their integrity stripped off them, their moral compass, there's moral damage done, and then they require these people to become a perpetrator. Because in order to live and survive in this society, you buy into the coercive control environment and you play the game for survival.
My gosh, it reminds me of, I've just finished reading Handmaid's Tale not that long ago. That's such a painful and brutal book if you're from a controlling group anyway. But at one point they describe this hideous scene where all the women rush in to murder, to beat up and kill a man.
Yes.
And they all participate in it. They're like animals, just ripping him to pieces because
absolutely degraded.
But they had to, because again, you were being watched if you didn't participate. Because one woman didn't want to, and the other woman was like, basically, you've got to get in there because they're watching you. If you don't join in this, it's gonna be seen that you don't have ultimate loyalty to the organisation.
Do you know why I think that's difficult for first generationists in a multi-generational cult group to come out? Because I think they feel deep shame that their own being was stripped from them and their moral compass, and they sat by, but they were trapped. We have to accept that they have been taken through the 9 stages over time.
Absolutely.
So we have to have compassion for those people and say to them, there is still a way for you to make this right. But it will take the big, bold move.
And it must be psychologically so hard to face the fact that your life has possibly been a lie, or that you're looking back on your whole life going, I've given my best years, my whole life to something that has ended up harming others and myself.
The thing to remember is this is a strategic campaign to dominate people.
Yeah.
Done slowly, over time, because if you'd went in straight away and did it, you wouldn't find your followers.
But this is the question, though. Like, this is one of the questions that we often get asked, right, is do these people know what they're doing? Do culty leaders intentionally and strategically set out to do this?
We'll see what's on their bookshelves. What have they got there?
Yeah.
Daniel Lowitch says, in her view, with all the investigation she done and all the research, she thinks that, there is a definite, they know what they're doing.
Because the other argument is that, oh, no, they're just, they're just idealistic people who didn't realise. But, I agree.
But I'm idealistic.
Most of them know what's happening. So we've got there was a lot to think about, and we want to leave our listeners and viewers with some questions to think about. And we don't know your lives, your context, and your relationships, but have a wee think as you go about your lives in the coming days or weeks, and think, where have I seen coercive control in my relationships, or where have I seen coercive controlling behaviour in maybe a group that I'm part of? These kind of behaviours can happen anywhere, not just in faith-based institutions or in wellness groups or yoga or therapy spaces. They can happen anywhere. It can happen in your businesses. It can happen at your tennis club, at your scouts hall. So run through the groups that you're part of. Run them through your mind. Think about these things. Think about your family relationships and your romantic relationships. Have you seen this kind of behaviour anywhere?
Are you part-way through? And take a look. See where number 9 gets you. There's a degradation there that's coming for you and your family.
So we hope that there's been something for you in today's episode which might help you to cult-proof your life. Please keep listening to more episodes of Cult Chat on Plains FM, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you may prefer to watch us on YouTube, our YouTube channel.
And then you can go to the show notes and you'll find some of the books and movie titles that we've referenced here today. Make sure that you're telling people about the value you're getting out of listening from Cult Chat, and let us know too. We'd really love that, wouldn't we? And thanks for helping share the message of Cult Chat even further through the Cultiverse.
Ka kite anō.
Bye. We would like to make a correction. Throughout this episode, we referred to Albert Biderman's work. The correct name is The Chart of Coercion. Apologies that we didn't get that right on a couple of occasions.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.